Hey y'all, welcome to the Goddesshood Collective. I am your host, the Voss Lady. So today I have on black hair with like a blonde skunk strip framing my face. I am a black woman with a warm brown golden skin tone. I am seated against a beige wall and I identify as her, she, and hers. Um, Okay, so I'm really excited for y'all to get into this. I want to set the tone for the podcast before we jump into some more of our actual episodes. So, the Goddesshood Collective, Goddesshood is all about unleashing your inner goddess through sisterhood. I have had some of the most transformative friendships of my life, and I want everyone else to experience goddesshood. Like, what does that feel like? What does that look like? And through this podcast, we're going to all be able to experience a little bit of goddesshood together, right? So, first things first, let's jump into the structure. So, every season of Goddesshood is going to be a different theme. So, this season, season one, the theme is cracking the friendship code, right? How do we get rid of some of the friendship norms that we are familiarized with? How do we break up with friendships that are like, not really serving me and my highest purpose? What does purpose even mean? Like, all of those things. So that's going to be a big part of this particular season. And so we're interviewing different women who have achieved some level of success and purpose in their lives. And we're asking them, like, hey, what friendships did you have to break up with? What norms did you have to break up with? How did that feel, right? Because we always talk about, oh, this is what we got to do, but how do we feel about doing that thing, Because breaking up with folks, like romantically, is very clear cut. But when it comes to your friendships, it's like, wait a minute, we've shared so much, sometimes even more than in a romantic relationship. So, what does that look like? How does that feel, right? So, we're going to get a lot of that and more from all of these amazing, incredible women that are so kind and have been so amazing just to share their stories with us, right? So, originally, I had planned to launch the podcast back in October, but I just kept having my own healing and transformation. And I just wanted to share all of that with y'all before we hopped into every single season of this podcast. So let's just get into this a little bit. First and foremost, friendship is about many things. It's about transparency. It's about mistakes. It's about recovering from those mistakes. It's about growth, healing, freedom, support, love, grace, all of those things, right? That's what friendship is about. Okay. On the podcast, we often asked our guests, what are some of the friendship norms that they had to break up with on their journey to purpose? And so, one thing for me is that I had to break up with this idea of being perfect. For so many years, I'd been closed off as a friend because of my own wounds of abandonment. I lost my mom at 13 and my best friend at 26. And I put a fence around my heart and carried on in a lot of shallow friendships and friendships where I could be the friend who had it all together for everyone. And friendships that would eventually implode, I would be in those too. And this was so I wouldn't be abandoned, so I could do the abandoning. And then I'd be in power instead of being a victim. Crazy, right? Like how our minds and how our bodies try to preserve, right, ourself, right? Because I had those wounds. So another thing I had to break up with is that my friendships could not influence who I am or who I was to become, right? You know, that expression that your parents say, if everybody's going to jump off a bridge, are you going to do it too? Like, no, but like there's some things that influence you by being around people long enough. You know, there's a quote that says, you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And so I've in the past compromised my own integrity as a result of the friendships I was in. Friendships that wanted to remain on the surface and not live in truth and love. And so I lean more into harmony than into truth in some of my friendships. And I decided I wanted better in my friendships. And once I made that decision, I began to manifest some of the best friendships of my life. And through these friends, everything started to click. And my purpose literally stared me in the face. Part of my purpose is that I'm a healer. My name means a gift from God, goddess, right? I am meant to heal, and I can only do that through disruption, through honesty, and sometimes being uncomfortable and making a mess. Now you can see why it's really crucial for me to have the right types of friendships that allow me to live in that purpose. Many of you who are listening then identify as a woman have been in my shoes. I want to read a piece of a book that I've read called The Dark Feminine Energy Bible. Females gradually started to suppress their feelings of sadness, sexuality, and anger. Instead, they started to lean towards one-sided femininity, which coincides with positivity, kindness, and acceptance. As a result, women feel the need to suppress their emotions and let things go. And then they're stuck with unresolved trauma, fears, and unconscious needs their whole life. I have to say, I am a human. I fucked up. I will fuck up, but I will recover too. And you will as well. So letting go and releasing everything you thought you ever knew about purpose, friendships, and yourselves, and immerse yourselves into these stories and open your heart to real, raw, uncut friendships is the difference in where you are now versus where you will be in the future by listening to this podcast. Okay. So through the brand Goddesshood, we're going to shift the narrative and change the world. We're shifting cancel culture. We are allowing ourselves and others to recover. We are creating a sisterhood free from jealousy and sabotage. We are creating a culture that celebrates mistakes and recovery. We are celebrating purpose-aligned friendships. I know this is a tall order, and yet I feel it in my spirit that our Goddesshood village will be at the helm of this movement. So what's one thing that you can do today to start contributing to this? Go to someone that you've made a mistake with or left on bad terms and recover. And these are some words you can use. I didn't have the courage or the capacity back then, but I do now. And I'm here to share truth and here to listen. Yes, 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 yes. Okay. So those are some things that you can do to get started today on your Goddesshood journey. And the next thing you can do is make sure you're back here next week to start hearing the other stories of different women and their purpose and their struggles. Also, we have a newsletter. So if you go to goddesshood.co, that is our site, and you can actually tap into our newsletter. You can also tap into our social media because we're there regularly and consistently, and be a part of the movement. Go ahead and recover and work with somebody today. I will share a story of recovery real quick because I don't tell y'all to do things that I don't do. So it's funny. I wrote this before and then I followed my advice on it afterwards. And I'm like, okay, this was so timely. And I didn't realize how timely it was. I had a friend that I just stopped talking to for like a year because we had a bad falling out. I was very angry. Very, very angry, to be honest. Still a little bit, but like I'm letting it go, right? I was very angry with them. And I just stopped talking to them for a whole year. And I was like, this is still a block for me because it's still lingering, right? So I went back and I finally had a conversation about 2 weeks ago and we recovered and we repaired. Now, I want y'all to understand, just because we do recovery doesn't mean that we need to go back to access, right? It doesn't mean we're dismissing our boundaries, right? It just means that we are having a talk. We're giving grace. We are sharing how we felt and they're sharing how they felt and their views on it and their sincerity behind, oh man, the breakdown that happened, And so that is an opportunity for us all to heal. Doesn't mean that we're going to be back the way that we used to, right? It just means that now they have a chance to heal and you have a chance to heal. And so for me, I noticed that there was still a block there because it was still lingering, right? Because this was like one of my best freaking friends, And so it just felt weird to just leave it like that. And so even though I was moving on and I was doing work on myself, that was still looming over me, right? So all of that to say, go back to someone and I didn't have the capacity back then. I do now, and have the conversation, right? Only when you're ready though, but sooner rather than later, because if you can clear that up, you can move forward in other areas of your life, right? So do that, do some recovery, and then next week be back here and we're going to talk about Deanna's story and we're going to get right into the mix of things. So I will see you all next week. I'm looking forward to it. Make sure you tap into the newsletter. Make sure you tap into the podcast. Follow us on Instagram and on Spotify here. And let's get it going. All right, I'll see y'all next week. Okay, bye.